Hello and welcome to the bi-weekly meeting podcast for the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Model Applications. If you'd like to stay up to date with our project, please click subscribe. And if you enjoy the content or have any questions, please feel free to comment and share. Now, on to our meeting.
All right, everybody, welcome to the October 9th version of the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Models expert group. So got a lot to go over today. In particular, we're getting into the close down phase on V2, which after today, I'm going to stop calling V2. I think we're confident we're getting that done this year. Thus, it is the 2024 version of the list, and we'll get into naming and numbering these things a little bit more like the other OWASP lists. But for now, just to review, we had narrowed down to 12 finalists. This was done through the brainstorming phase we had, followed by the sort of, let's call it the generative phase, where people submitted a bunch of new ones. I think we had 30 plus new ones in addition to the 10 that we started with. We did a bunch of voting, ranking, and the core team met. We swizzled things around a lot, and we landed at these 12, which included preemptively moving or removing a couple of the original top 10 that we knew we were going to merge in elsewhere or that had become somewhat redundant, and adding a few new ones that were either very highly rated in the last round of voting or captured as really key themes in the brainstorming and voting that we needed to really focus an entry around. So we've landed on these 12. This is in alphabetical order. We tried to, as best we could, make the voting form impartial, although I will note a few interesting things that have come up around the voting. Let's see. So we opened up the voting just yesterday. Ads and I collaborated on this schedule. I think it's pretty straightforward, but the idea is we want to get this closed down, done, and out in about a month. And what that means is that we'll let the voting run for about a week. We're up to 44 votes now, which is good. Again, I'll come back to the status on the voting, but I think we'll have plenty of votes there to give us some good ideas to give us that final input so that we can do the ranking and sorting. The week of 10/14, we'll work on doing some review of the results. I have a system where we can get the voting results out pretty quickly. So I'll try to get those turned around within 24 hours of us closing down so we can look at that. And then I want to make sure that we have some dedicated discussion on the core team around the results. So at this point, I'll mention a couple things about the voting. One, I won't vote because I have an unusual amount of visibility into this. I'm not going to share the current result set because I think that queers the voting, same way that you don't really share the intermediate results during an election. But, you know, early on, there were a couple things where I thought some things were in really odd order. I think there were some things that were odd about the voting. I even asked GPT to look for signs of voter tampering, and it came up with a few interesting little bits. I also had one well-meaning cybersecurity researcher reach out to me and write me a lengthy note informing me that me not putting sufficient amounts of security around the voting means that somebody could manipulate it, and he voted 3 times. So I think we are going to have to assume that our little community attracts enough attention that we'll just have to make sure we put some human judgment on top of the voting. And I think that's what we can do that week of 10/14 is just make sure that we as a team who's been shepherding this project for the last year feel really good about the final votings and rankings. Honestly, I feel like any combination of 10 of these 12 makes a strong list. So I'm not worried that anything can go too wrong here, but I do think we can do that. That would leave us with 1021 to do some final content cleanup. If you've looked at the voting form, I did put in 2 entries for each vote. One was for importance, which we can use to help skew the ranking. The other was for simply what I called style. And the thing that's designed to catch is things that are highly rated on the list or that get low style ratings, which means by and large, people probably think they're confusing or not well written. That would allow us to put a little extra attention that week on anything that really we feel like it needs it. That gives us the last week to go do layout, final reviews. We've seen over and over again on these things that when we publish them, we will instantly find horrible typos or glaring omissions or formatting problems. So this way, I think ads and Tetsuo have a really tight publishing pipeline now, which is awesome. So we should be able to get the layout done pretty quickly, and then we can all stare at it for a week before we publish it. So ads, do you want to add anything here?
No, that all sounds good. Thank you, buddy. One thing maybe during that human in the loop intervention, we just triple check naming conventions. I know we've like cleaned up a bunch because I always use that insecure output handling as one example, right? I know we've changed that, but maybe to make sure we're all agreed on naming conventions for each entry. But
I agree. So let's take that on as part of the final set of reviews. We can even think about this week and next week and spark up some discussion on those.
Sweet. Yeah, that sounds cool.
All right. So comments, suggestions on this close down phase? Any comments? All right. Well, before we hand it off to the various leads for some additional commentary, I just do want to say thank you to the group. This iteration was definitely harder and more time consuming than the original version of the list. I think we put more effort into this. We had a broader group work on it. I think the results will come out with something that is impressive and is a real quantum leap past what the first version of the list is. We know a lot more. I think we can issue more guidance. So thanks to everybody who's contributed, whether you're somebody who's directly worked on one of these 12 entries, whether you were somebody who submitted something into the broader thing, or whether you've voted or commented in the Slack channels. It's all been a really important part of the process. So looking forward to getting this to the next phase. So with that, we'll move on. And I think this is Rachel, if I'm not mistaken.
Rachel, who's fumbling with her mute button. Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the sort of drastic change that was made in prompt injection, because I sort of feel like I'm sort of anticipating some like questions about sort of the change in direction and scope. So I just wanted to kind of call that out. So really what I'm trying to show here is there's sort of this, well, I'll talk about it, right? So the prompt from the user interacts with the system prompt. That information is then passed to what we call the attention layer. And that, and I am not, you know, I'm a certified machine learning engineer. I am by no means like long in the beard, gray in the tooth, right? In terms of AI, but this is my understanding, having talked to many experts. So, you know, that the prompt goes to the system prompt, it's sent to the attention layer. The attention layer sort of bounces around. That's pretty, it's not transparent to us. It's pretty opaque what goes on there. And it has a lot to do with the way data is being like multi-hot or one hot encoded. And if it's trying to, you know, do classification versus prediction, and even sort of like the randomization that you insert there, right? So like very intentionally, when you're building the attention layer in a model, you are in fact inserting some randomness. And then that attention layer sort of determines the shape and trajectory of the model reaching in to its vector space of information, whether that's word embeddings or the data that it's collected. And then it determines sort of the shape and trajectory of the way that generation or prediction or classification is in that vector space. That is then produced into the output that either goes to the user, or maybe it will go to some like agents and plugins and whatever application's been built onto it or downstream. In version 1, right, which is what I'm showing here, we really, the scope of prompt injection was pretty much focused on 2 places that prompt information that's passed in the prompt, data that's passed in the prompt, could influence this. Steve, if you could go on to the next slide.
Yep.
So really what prompt injection in the new version is a recognition that actually this data that's passed through in the prompt can affect any part of this. And by affecting either the way the system prompt executes, the way the attention layer and the randomization interact with that, the shape and trajectory that could be changed, the space, because of the shape and trajectory influence, the space that generation is pulling the data back to, and then what the output is, right? So like we've even seen prompt injection that are like, you know, we have prompt shields or some other like filtering for like certain commands or certain words, but we've seen prompt injections that are like, add these 3 letters, and then there's some garbled, and add this letter, right? Like in your output, put this, when combined together, what would be a system command, right? And then that could be passed on to applications, plugins, things that are downstream. And so really the changes that we made are really to have a broader scope around when information passed at the prompt level influences the model or the model's business context, like its purpose of how it's supposed to interact with like applications and plugins, when that influences like any part of this, right? So it could even, right, we've even seen in certain types of prompt data that gets put in that it'll actually sort of change the direction and shape of that generative process, right? And that's like even evident, and there's sort of a question about, that's sort of the way AI models work, right? So there's like kind of a question about whether you could actually like truly get rid of that, right? So that's why we see like if you have a question that's extremely biased in the way that it is phrased, it may influence the model to behave in a way that's unexpected for the business context of the way the business wants that model to behave, and may give you some like racist answer or something like that, right? So this is really the effort we did here to change the scope of prompt injection, was really to support some of the other entries that sort of rely on this understanding that the prompts can cause the system in various different parts to act in a different way, and sort of neatly ties into some of the work that others have been doing around RAG. So I just really wanted to kind of like lay that out and kind of explain in the why. These are basically sort of the 3 big reasons that we thought there was, that the group of folks, and lots of people helped me on this, but the group of folks who really came together, these are the basic 3 reasons why we decided that there needed to be such a drastic change. And it also sort of provides unity. If you go out there and you look at like lots of different sort of well-written academic papers and things from Anthropic and Microsoft and OpenAI, it also kind of provides a unity for all of those different leading technology companies' definitions of prompt injection. So I will try to take questions if anybody has them.
Hello, Rachel. Like I have one question. So like I was reading your updated documentation. I think like jailbreaking and prompt injection is like different.
Yes.
And like I think, and you have like added in the common examples of vulnerability jailbreaking. So maybe like jailbreaking can be categorized as a different vulnerability instead of prompt injection. Because
So we do make we do in the second version actually call out the difference specifically between prompt injection and jailbreaking, because I think also some people may be under, so doing penetration testing of jailbreaking, or penetration testing of AI and doing jailbreaking, I can jailbreak through prompt injection a system to give me bomb instructions. But then if I turn around and I say, hey, now make me instructions for how to make methamphetamines, it doesn't, jailbreaking it does not necessarily mean like everything. A lot of times to ask it another question, I have to start all over from the jailbreak and get it to a place where now it will be jailbroken for like that term. So in a lot of these cases, like jailbreaking and some of the other things that we've seen around, like, well, I can give it prompt injection to do system prompt leakage. That's part of the reason we pushed the definition up so that these things can neatly fit under it. So jailbreaking, in my opinion, is one type of objective or one type of impact from prompt injection. And I really pull apart too the difference between like an attack and the vulnerability, because we're really focused on the system being vulnerable to prompt injection, where to me jailbreaking is like about the objectives and the impact, which is more of a description of the attack than the vulnerability space and what we're trying to architect and give guidance on how to prevent. I hope that makes sense. But I do agree with you. I think that clarity was really important. And you might have actually been, there were so many people who gave me input, but you might have actually been the one who gave me some of the edits to make that clarification. So if it was you, thank you. That was helpful.
And one more, like I think like in prompt injection, like if like image based prompt injection, like we can add instructions into the image, like if we can add this, like I think like, because I was seeing one, I was reading a report and like image based prompt injection was more effective.
Yeah, so multimodal, right? Like multimodal, we've had a few conversations, and in fact, one of the candidates that Brian and I wrote early on when we were talking about V2 was about multimodal. I did try to prepare this for the world of multimodal. Like I strongly believe like in a year, we will not have anything but multimodal that we're dealing with. That's just like my opinion. I tried to make this so that it will be prepared for like that next version by not focusing on the natural strings of text, right? And in some cases, like audio, prompt injection is possible through audio because the audio does get converted to natural strings of text and then it interacts in the system in the same way like written prompt injection does. But I absolutely agree. Like I do think multimodal is coming down the pipeline, but since that didn't, our multimodal concurrent processing candidate that Brian and I wrote like early in, I want to say like March, didn't make it in the ranking. We just tried to focus on making the prompt injection sort of high lifted enough that it would cover those instances, and think probably in our 2025 release that we will be like a little bit more specific on the multimodal. I mean, if anybody thinks like, if the whole group thinks that like we should introduce the multimodal concept in this one, like I'm open for it, but that's why I didn't tuck it in there to begin with.
So I think we could take this back offline, back to the prompt injection channel. But I think when we talked about having a separate entry for multimodal, I think a lot of the group felt like, well, it really just all falls back into this capturing the broad category of things. That doesn't mean that we couldn't call out like, examples of attack. Somebody puts a prompt in an image or an audio stream or something, just to remind people that this is not always just going to be simple streams of text to a chatbot. So let's take that back to the channel, but I certainly would have no objections to capturing it here. It just didn't seem like it was a separate entry, if I remember the discussion right.
There is a cool CTF on it, like promptairlines.com. Like you can, I played it, like it has like 2 levels for image-based prompt injection. So maybe like can showcase this example. Like I am sharing it here. Like you guys can play it. Like it is it's good.
Yeah, if you got some stuff, stick it in the channel, and I'll see where I can kind of like pull it in.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So red teaming, Krishna, you here?
Yeah, I mean, and nothing fancy. I just, you can read it. I just wanted to put it as a status saying that we have all these things in, and then the call and the document is all pinned in the channel. That's about it. And then this is our timeline. That is more important than anything else. We do plan to stick with the timeline, and we were thinking of doing, maybe we can do an earlier version. I don't think it will work out. So we are following your advice, Steve, choosing a critical mass, right? As small as MVP, and then sticking with this timeline and see where it leads to.
Cool.
Nothing on this
Next
one.
two.
Just published the newsletter. Just wanted to give the open rate and that kind of stuff, and that's it.
Let's see. Was this Arnish?
Yes, Steve. I think Scott just made one particular edit on the slide. And again, I'll just call it out. Maybe if you want to
Okay.
refresh, otherwise I can just call it out, right?
Go for
So this one is an initiative for like bill of materials when it comes to AI or machine learning itself, right? And I think like I purposely chose AI bomb, but we can actually call it ML bomb or what have you, right? So this is an initiative that I'm proposing. So the only addition Scott made was it's like a proposal. It's not an initiative which has been approved or has been sanctioned yet. So I'm purposely keeping it as a proposal at this point in time. So the intent for this one is similar to the executive order on software bill of material, right? I think it seemed like the industry is moving toward having some sort of assurances how the model has been created, what kind of data sets have been created or used, like with supporting stuff on the model card itself, right? So what I've been speaking to John, Scott, and a couple of other folks. In fact, like when we had the panel discussion at OWASP last week, or maybe last week, I had a conversation with Steve Springett also on a similar line, right? So this proposal is taking all the effort that has gone in the Cyclone DX, having some structure to it, but taking it to the master, right? How do you actually ensure, first of all, is the ML or the AI bomb is like structured? Does it have all the relevant fields itself? And all the second part, which is more important and closer to my heart, right? How do you operationalize this? How do you ensure like organization can actually start creating and consuming the information at the same time, right? Let's say there is an issue, there is a breach or something, right? You should be able to articulate how the model was created at a specific time interval. So again, like it's a very, very high level slide, but I think the initiative has a link to the document that I've shared with a bunch of people, and I've started soliciting some sort of feedback.
Right, and you're putting this together so we can put it through the initiative kind of approval process. So you're working right now on the draft document that can
Yes.
then be reviewed, and then the core team can follow the voting process that we have in place for governance for new initiatives, so that we can make sure we've got all the resources in place, we've got the team in place, and we've got a good path toward execution, which would be awesome.
And I think like one good thing or one complexity, if you may call, I think it would require like collaboration with multiple groups within OWASP, whether it's AI Exchange, LLM Top 10, Cyclone DX, and maybe a few more. So it's definitely would require a lot of collaboration across the board. And I've been in discussion with Star also on this one.
Yeah, I know when we talked about it early on, it was as you know, Steve and I had talked about how do we do something. Steve Spriggett and I had talked about how do we do something with regard to Cyclone DX. So this is great that we get this proposal together. I think there's work already done from an ML bomb perspective. So it's figuring out what the deltas are and what needs to be. And I know there are several that folks have brought up to me in the past. So I look forward to seeing the updated drafts as we get through.
So again, this is the first time I'm actually putting something together. So I rely on you, Steve, and a bunch of others to actually ensure it goes through, find all the missing pieces or whatever gaps might be. I'll try to ensure like all those are addressed.
Cool. Yeah, just a reminder for folks in terms of what Scott's helped put together here for kind of governing these things. I think we've gotten into a position where this group given the fact that the group has gotten large and popular, has spawned desire to do a lot of different things. And I think Sandy intentionally or unintentionally created a model for this, with the CISO checklist being created under the banner of this group, but being a fairly autonomous subgroup. And that's been really super successful. So I think what Scott's trying to codify here is, how do we create more of those and formalize it without it getting crazy? And so the red teaming initiative that Krishna talked about is another example, and that is one that kind of went through the whole process. And I think that maybe initially slowed it down a little bit, but I think it also made sure it was well formed when it launched, and has put it into a good place, where we see sort of the organization level that has now. So I like the idea of putting this through this. Krishna and I did discuss earlier this week. I think this topic is ripe. It really needs help. I often tell people that this supply chain chapter in my book became the longest chapter. I didn't expect it to. I attempt to show people how to construct an ML bomb, but I think mostly what I demonstrated to myself is the Cyclone DX ML bomb isn't really there for practical use with things like a complicated LLM app. So I think putting some energy into this is great. And I think putting this through Scott's governance structure will ensure that everybody understands what the intent is, how we're going to run it, and how it relates to everything. So any other comments from the group around this piece? All right.
So before I do like an update on this, I'll just say a kind of a lingering thought I had about that was, I did create for Health ISAC, basically like how to start a working group and how to define what your deliverables are going to be, who is a driver and what is their role. If any of that is helpful, or like if OWASP would like to have copies of it to see if maybe there's something that we could put like in a package. So if somebody decides they want to do something like that, we can kind of just let me know. So
yeah, that would be great. Why don't you go ahead and share that? I'd love to see that as we give more, some more tips for folks. And also just want to highlight too that Rachel, you were the first one. This initiative was the first one to go through our first framework of governance. So awesome. And so now we've got a couple that seem to have worked well in terms of getting enough energy behind the projects to get stuff delivered, which is great.
Yeah. And speaking of that, so our deepfake guide is now available. There's some links there. Brian's going to be working on sharing basically like a social media talking point that calls out the authors, basically promotes the guide. We'll share that so that other folks who want to post about it on their LinkedIn and things like that sort of have a nice copy and paste that you can use, and that you can edit to sort of like keep the main points, but like use your own voice if you would like to. Brian, I actually think he is on the call. Brian, do you want to talk about the well, I'll just say the AI enhanced cyber attack guidance we are still working on. I had to push that out a little bit to accommodate some timelines around the threat modeling documentation for the red teaming initiative and the prompt injection rewrite. But this weekend going to be working, Sarah's been working very hard on this already. I'll be spending some more time on this. So we hope to have that second draft out next week, and then start asking for some more volunteers in that CTI channel for some edits and feedback on that. Brian, if you're on the line, do you want to talk about the AI incident guide?
You can jump in. So I'm gonna be honest. I've been transitioning to a new job over the last few weeks, and I lost some momentum on helping to lead this. So we may do like a re-kickoff, but we have done a lot of scoping on this just to get kind of momentum back together, which will probably happen in early November, just because I will also be unavailable for actually much of the month of October. So I will kind of go back to the AICTI channel and discuss this. And maybe something we should do is just to maybe maintain energy is maybe starting this again after the AI enhanced cyber attack guide comes out, just because I feel like those are kind of conflicting efforts in terms of taking up people's time and energy. But yeah, apologies that this one lost a little bit of momentum. Speaking of which.
No, I think it's good timing because, like you said, while you are doing your transition and doing some travel, we can wrap the other thing up, and then you'll actually have more people available. So yeah, I think that works great. And then we have been working very hard on the exploit generation for AI. I just want to call out Bob or Robert Sullivan has been just kicking butt, rock star, doing some of this research. We've had some really, really interesting observations as we've gone through the learning. So we actually decided to sort of break this up into 2 phases. And we're going to put out a deliverable on phase 1 by the end of the year. So for those who haven't sort of gotten the background on this, there was a couple of academic papers written by a professor out of the University of Illinois about LLM's ability to generate exploits on day 1, meaning vulnerability descriptions available, or 0-day exploits. When those of us who been in cybersecurity and looked at it, there was a couple of things that sort of stood out to us about that study. It was all web applications. There was some questions about the methodology that they used. And so we actually have been using a tool that was developed for another academic paper called SciBench that does sort of like break down for LLMs in these sort of subtasks how to perform certain exploits. And we decided to take Juice Shop, which is a popular OWASP capture the flag, and start to look at some of the differences in the types of exploits, and essentially some of our observations have been around to get any sort of exploit to be successful, the number of sort of subtasks and iteration that you have to really give an LLM demonstrates a fair amount of knowledge to start with, right? Like you have to have already about 80% knowledge of like whatever it is that you're doing. LLMs are better at, different LLMs are better at some exploits than others, things like that. So it's been very, very interesting. And we're sort of gearing up for a call for volunteers. Essentially what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how easy it is to generate subtasks for the SciBench in order to deliver these exploits from an LLM. So essentially what I've been doing is training a GPT on the format for these subtasks that are written in JSON, and then giving it a bunch of information for like cross-site scripting, and then seeing if LLMs can generate a subtask that when given to another LLM as instructions could successfully exploit that type of vulnerability. So very exciting work, and I think some of our initial impressions and our initial findings are worthy enough that we're sort of not waiting for a completion of phase 2 to start getting some of the deliverables out. So we're hoping for that phase 1 deliverable, really about our impressions going through some of this research, to be by the end of the year. And then we'll really kick off phase 2. So if you've been interested in sort of getting involved in this, just join the channel and look for that call for volunteers for doing some of this work with us. We're going to this week really work on getting some instructions and getting some structure so people kind of know what they're volunteering for. So yeah, very excited about that, and hope anybody who's interested drops into the channel.
Very cool. All right, I have a bunch of questions. First one on the deepfake guidance. Maybe I just missed it. Is that already published?
Yes, that's already published and out.
Okay, we did that very stealthily. Now, so I like the idea of having the social media thing. Like, let's call that published, but all that means is it's on the internet and nobody knows about it. Are we planning to coordinate a launch around that? Should we pick a date, everybody, that we're doing it?
So we do have a couple of things that we're trying to coordinate around it. One is some additional content. So a video that was being produced, I think some of that has gotten delayed because I think Aubrey has had some is less available right now.
See, I think we should just use that Deepfake podcast. Like if we should just use that because it's available and it doesn't,
Yeah, I think that's great. And so I actually we want to fold that into some of the PR stuff we're doing too. So we have a PR group now we have on board as of tomorrow. So we'll be able to also do a broader push. So definitely we want to make sure anybody can get it out, what's out, but we want to put it as part of a push that we're putting together.
All right, let's work it in the PR group then, but let's come up with a date whereby we want to announce it. Because I think whatever announcing we didn't even get to me, much less the industry at large. I think this is something that will generate a ton of interest. And I think if we coordinate around this, we can get some real attention. So let's just plan a date. I love the idea of having the social media guidance, making it easier for people to do that, but let's just coordinate.
Just an interesting comment on that. So presumably people saw that Geoffrey Hinton got a Nobel Prize, right? For the transformative, basically main transformer guy, right? A bunch of his students ended up at OpenAI and places. And then also he got one for physics, and then Dimas Hassabis from DeepMind got the one for chemistry. So here's AI getting 2 Nobel Prizes. So and certainly Hinton has been saying, you know, the world's going to end kind of stuff sometimes. So this is maybe a good time to say, hey, and so what do you want to know about that? Nobel Prize at one end, and the other end, you know, what's going on? So just a thought.
Yeah. Look, no shortage of attention in this deepfake one in particular, super topical, super hot, which is why I think if we put some muscle behind this, we can attract some mainstream interest in this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely
absolutely.
when we did the voting, it was like very popular, but we decided it was not the right fit for the top 10.
Yeah,
So,
it just doesn't fit there, but us having guidance from the group, absolutely. So this is the right thing to do. Oh, all right. Total switch, geeky question. With the exploit generation stuff, and you talked about using LLMs to generate tasks and hand off subtasks. Have you looked at something like O1 compared to sort of the standard GPTs, at what impact that would have? Because it seems like that would be way better at this than what we've had state of the art so far.
So actually that's phase 2. So phase 2 is we're going to come up with categorizations of exploits that we want to test, because our hypothesis from phase 1 is essentially that it's good at some and not good at others, and that there is a difference in models. So one of the things that I found really interesting is people tend to focus on like ChatGPT, and Scibench did as well, but Scibench's tool allows us to send the same prompt to multiple LLMs. The thing is, we know LLMs interact differently with different prompts phrasing. So we believe that some of the prompts that are actually in the Scibench tool may have been optimized for, say, ChatGPT, but don't execute well on Llama. But what's interesting, Llama, even though in the Scibench research paper performed very poorly, we know Llama is actually, like through CTI, like we know threat actors have actually successfully used Llama to generate like PowerShell exploits. But that's a privilege escalation as opposed to the work that like the University of Illinois did, which was largely web application, like SQL injection and initial access, right? So phase 2 is really looking at these categories of exploits and the different models and comparing if there's strengths and weaknesses, right? Is maybe Llama particularly good at privilege escalation and Claude is just terrible at it? Is it web applications or sort of the bailiwick?
I'm just giving you my gut reaction, which is O1 will crush them all really badly. But my experimenting with this kind of stuff, O1 is just so much better at this reasoning stuff than any of these kind of current gen token predictor models. I'm fine with it being phase 2, but I think it should be really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk at length at sort of like the balance of the amount. And this is really what we're at the end of the day, what we're trying to comment on is if this technology has really introduced a innovative type of risk or weaponry in the hacker's hands. And a lot of what we're sort of discovering is, at least so far with the models we've tested so far, and we haven't done Strawberry, that basically you already have to have about 70-80% knowledge to get a successful exploit.
Yeah.
So the amount of uplift, like for me to like get ChatGPT to give me Kerber roasting, I have to already have a pretty intimate understanding of Kerber roasting. So like, how much uplift as an actor am I really getting, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like at the end of the day. So I think that it will be interesting to see, like, if we compare Strawberry, right? Is there something like that deeper reasoning? Has that a significant change from the previous models? I think that by itself will be really fascinating. And that's some of the things that we hope to discover in phase 2.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Great. All right.
One thing I wanted, one
go,
last
Scott.
question I have for Rachel. So on that process, so how are we doing for budget? So I know I've allocated budget for
really good. I think we've only spent like $15 or something in phase 1. We've tried really hard, because phase 1 we're really just trying to like, okay, what do we need? You know, trying to learn things. We've actually specifically set up like the iteration tokens to be limited so that we're not spending a ton of money. Phase 2 is where we actually expect a fair amount of money to be spent, right? Because we're comparing models, we're doing a variety of different exploits, we're seeing how many iterations, basically how much does it cost for certain types of exploits. In phase 1, we're really trying to, like, the way the Sidebench works is that when you are sort of directing it to attempt an exploit, it sort of says, oh, this is like a web-based exploit. Okay, I have these tasks where I say, okay, first generate like a command to ping the server, then nmap the server, right? Like it's very like tasked out and regimented, but those tasks were only created by Sidebench for certain types of exploits. So now what we're really trying to do is create that corpus of subtasks so that when we go into phase 2, we have these subtasks for executing certain exploits in all the categories that and that's not like taking a bunch of tokens, because we're not sending a bunch of prompts to like do that. So we're doing really, really well is the bottom line in the budget.
Well, I just want to make sure don't under optimize either. So we do have a number of sponsors and more sponsors coming in. So I want to make sure that we're not under cranking, which that's my main concern. So if you're going to be doing things that, if you see ways to that the impact, it's great that we're not spending a lot to get an impact, but don't let the money be a barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll have enough information after phase 1 to have a better scoping estimate for phase 2. So I'll be able to tell you like, hey, we think we're going to overrun budget by this amount unless we like remove this model from the comparison, or we remove like this category of exploit, right? So we'll be able to have, you know, that's part of what we're hoping to achieve in phase 1 is a much better understanding of the resources, time, and structure that we'll need for that bigger phase 2. Yeah, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, and as soon as you submit anything, just right now, we're getting the process is starting to get more streamlined now as we're operating. So if you just ping me as you submit things, let me know. That way we can make sure we get those taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Hey, Scott, this does bring up a question. I've seen some of the sponsors start to announce themselves as sponsors, but we haven't announced the program yet. Do you have a target date yet?
Yeah, we want to get that program this month is what our plan is to do that. So we're talking about doing a bunch of pre-brief outreach as well, and that's what we're start planning on tomorrow. We have the good news is we've got a lot of content, as we talked about before. We want to maximize the output and to maximize the coverage. So we've made an investment. Not everybody may know this, but as part of our sponsorship, we're making the investment in a PR agency to help us not just do it on their own, but also help us coordinate with sponsors, all the PR organizations, so that we can have a broader voice in the market and get some of these things out. A lot of our own communities are great ways to get things out to get started with, but there's still a lot of people who don't know the work of the project, and we need to get that out and rolling. So that's our timing. roughly, but we'll have a full timeline set up after I meet with the PR team tomorrow, and we finalize sort of the roadmap.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else have a topic for today?
Yeah, I stuck some slides in late, Steve, on the checklist, and I wanted to give everyone an update.
Let me try and do a reload then.
Steve, I have one question. So like, do we are planning to like introduce about like ML based attacks in the OWASP top LLM, or like we will introduce in the like ML based attack vector like in the next session, or like something different like from LLMs?
What do you mean by ML based?
Like for example, like adversarial attacks, or maybe like facial recognition system bypass attacks. So because like I was seeing like these are the also attacks like in ML models. So like do
Yeah.
you are going to introduce these attacks also in future versions?
There's actually a separate group at DITA Steve started the OWASP top 10 for LLM. So there is a group dedicated, and then the other place that we have to kind of make sure that there isn't somebody working on it is, I know that the AI exchange puts more work into like actual at the model level. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
understood.
Okay, yeah, this slide before.
This one?
Steve.
Okay.
No, there's a slide before it. Yeah.
This one.
So
Okay.
so what I proposed a timeline for the checklist, which actually had me, organizing and rewriting the checklist version 2 to coincide. I was planning to publish it right after we came out with the new version 2, the 2024 top 10. I've been having different discussions with people, went through all of the comments, and the conclusion that I came to was it was high effort with low value, because the basic concepts around the checklist still apply. And I still see people posting it. People tell me all the time how they're using it. So it's still being used and beneficial to people out in the community. And so it didn't make a ton of sense to try and rush out a new version when the current version is being very useful for people. And it also allows me to dedicate more of my time to like the CTI, the defense group that Rachel's part of, and the red teaming group, and to step in, just like the SBOM group that was mentioned today. I'd like to kind of travel and just support other teams so that when I come out with the next version, we're using the resources and the information that we've discovered through these other groups. So the other key takeaway from it was there was a lot of conversation around in the comments about, disagreements on a definition, and it was minor wording, and, you should have said it this way, or I think it should be said that way. And if you go to the next slide, Steve, we actually way back, oh gosh, this has been well over a year ago, we started a definitions page, and it actually hasn't been managed or maintained. And so what I proposed to Steve was taking definitions out of all of our, as much as possible, out of our documentation. So it's not so heavy for people to read and go through, so they can get to the content they need as quickly as possible, and then maintaining a definition page that allows us to be more agile and keep it up to date, because this stuff continues to move quickly and new words come out almost weekly. And I offered to go ahead and lead that effort. So just wanted to bring that to the rest of the group and see if there was any other support or feedback on that as a contribution to the top 10.
Yeah, I think that the definitions part is great. We've lifted that, and we have a glossary on the main website that's based off that definition. So we'll just want to make sure we'll mirror that over to the website, what's coming off of the wiki, so we're aligned.
Okay.
What's on the website right now is what was on the wiki plus a few. So we just have it in two places. Just want to note that we want to make sure those are aligned.
And ideally, what I'd like to do is just have it in one place. So everyone has one common URL that they can just bookmark, and we can add it into our documentation, and everybody can just say, okay, this is the single source of truth. And obviously talk about, where did we get this definition? Are there multiple definitions? That type of thing.
Yeah, hey Sandy, I'd love to take some of the definitions that we called out like in our deepfake guide, and get this updated here. So once it's decided like what document to edit or what link to edit, just let me know, and I'm like happy to throw those in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I always think that we'll probably end up with two, and we just need to figure out which, because one of them is used also on the website also for things like SEO search and that sort of thing. So it helps us, people find us with the definitions, and our definitions end up filtering out through Google search, etc. That don't get necessarily collected when we're doing our working area. So we kind of have, the wiki is our working space. So I would suggest that maybe that's the first place, because everybody has the editability on that. And then we'll have the web team move that over to the website, which would then, provide easier access to some of those. And then we could decide which document we want to include whether we want to include the link to the wiki as a working doc, or we want to include the public site. I don't have an opinion on that yet, but we can get to one.
Yeah, just bringing it to the group so we can I can actually create a definitions channel, and we can start having conversations in there. But Steve thought it was a good idea, so I wanted to bring it to the rest of the team. Also wanted to point out in the checklist channel, I did share the link to a working draft for version 2, and there's kind of a scratch pad up there. So, as you come up with ideas or things that you think should be in version 2 of the checklist, please, edit and give me that feedback. I'd love to hear it. One thing, I talked to Krishna a little bit about this. There was quite a bit of comments on RAG, and they're saying that they wanted more information in the checklist. For the checklist, my vision is to keep it simple. Like, I want it easy so people can just run through it. And then if there's other documentation, they can link to it if they want a deep dive, but it should be something that, a cybersecurity leader, a risk management leader, a cybersecurity team can go through and say, okay, orient, observe, orient, decide, act, kind of come up with a strategy from it, and then be able to build from there. But just wanted to throw it out there that there may be some appetite to actually create a RAG specific document. I don't think.
Yeah, I'm working on that one.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay.
like we talking about, what we will do is, I was thinking about it as waiting for the voting to complete and to see whether this one goes up or down. In spite of what happens, we will have a document out on the RAG. So probably, Scott, we should go through an initiative, or it's more of a document, right? It's not an initiative.
Well, and it may be, so it could be a doc, it could also just be a blog too. So we have the ability to write and publish blogs, and I don't think we're utilizing that as much as we could be.
Okay. We could do a RAG blog. We could also do a RAG blog. I was thinking of doing a couple of blogs on the V2, right? Once V2 comes in, that would be a good time for us to coordinate, and then you will have your things in there, right? So that way we can also have a series of blogs, not only this one. I'm sure Rachel, who is not here, so we can actually volunteer up. I'm just kidding. Because the things that she talked about just today, right? That saying that prompt engineering, it has more implications and all kind of stuff like that. So there'll be more. We should set up a set of blogs, a narrative that how do I say it? That puts forward a good narrative of our V2024. Otherwise, our leader, Steve will get upset at me if I say V2. So V2024. So we should do a narrative around that one probably. Yeah. Anyway, going back, yes, we will have a RAG document or things like that. I'll work with Sandy and everybody else to get that one out going after the voting is done.
Great. I think do we still have the slides? I threw in a couple slides as well late. I just didn't want to bother Steve trying to reload it, but now that it's reloaded, I'll just comment on the two things since we don't have the slides up.
Steve is out.
Yep, I see he's gone.
Yeah.
So I'll comment on two things. One was we do have the COE staged on the website to go out. So the Center of Excellence Guide, I just want to thank everybody for all their contributions on that to get us to where we are today. And so that is scheduled to go out today, and there is a blog associated with that that'll go out today as well. We also have a lot of people who are now adding their solutions to the solutions guide and solutions page. If you have not already added your tools, that's great. We've got about 40 different solutions that have been added by a combination of both open source and proprietary based on the solutions document and the LLM ops framework. So great for having those added. A number of our sponsors have added those in as well. So we're making some great progress there. So, but if you do have things, please go to the link that's been shared in multiple channels. Unfortunately, I don't have the slide up right now, which has the QR code to go to that link, which would be great. Actually, let me see if I can grab the slides real quickly here on my side, and I can just share that for a second. Let's see, I think it's here it is, yeah. So let me go to slideshow. Yep, and so for those who are online and you want to add to it, so it's already, the site is staged. We're just building the rest of the solutions in there. You can grab the QR code. It'll send you to a Google form where you can add. So we take input from end users, and these are tools that are addressing aspects of the top 10 for LLMs so that we can make it easy for organizations and companies, individuals, developers, et cetera, to find the tools and resources. So if you had some, go ahead and add them, and they'll be incorporated into the site.
Scott, I just tried the QR code and it says this QR code is being deactivated for some reason.
Oh, that's rude.
Yeah, just let you know. So.
Okay, good to know. So if you can't see the QR code, there is a forms link below.
Sure. Yeah.
Less convenient. So save the page, do a snapshot of the page, and then you can go to that. Or if you're on the Slack channel, you can hop in the Slack channel. And I'll go find out why the QR code is disabled. Thank you for highlighting that.
No problem. Actually, what I do sometimes, if you take photos, certainly on a Mac, it does OCR on text in the photos, which is scary but good. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Sandy, you were waving?
I'm saying goodbye. I gotta go.
All right. I gotta go as well. So I guess that's a wrap. Thanks everyone for hopping on, and we'll see you again.
Thanks for checking out our bi-weekly meeting podcast.
Bye.
If you'd like to stay up to date on all of the latest news for the OWASP Top 10 for large language model applications, please click subscribe. And of course, we'd appreciate it if you'd share with a friend to grow our community. We'll see you in 2 weeks.